All right, let's talk about something fascinating. High-tech fish farms. You know, these incredibly advanced systems. We're going to peel back the layers and find the one single thing that runs the whole show. And I'll give you a hint. It's probably not what you're thinking. It's not the fish.
So, to really wrap our heads around this, a feed expert named Steve Bachman came up with the perfect analogy. He says a modern fish farm, what they call a recirculating aquaculture system, or RAS, well, it's basically a closed spaceship. Think about that for a second. Everything that goes in has to be dealt with inside. Nothing just disappears. The stakes? Unbelievably high. The life support system has to be perfect.
Okay, so if we're flying this aquatic spaceship, right? What's the control stick? What's the one lever you pull that makes the whole mission a success or a total failure? Now, your first guess might be the fish themselves, right? Or maybe the pumps, the hardware. But the real answer? It's something much, much more basic.
And this is where we need to totally flip our perspective. To get this, you have to stop thinking about these farms as places that grow fish. They're not. They're actually super sophisticated systems designed to do one thing: process feed. I mean, literally every single thing in one of these systems. We're talking the filters, the oxygen systems, even how big the tanks are. It's all designed around that one variable, the feed. The feed is what creates the biological load, it's the single biggest operating cost, and yeah, it's what decides if the whole thing makes money or goes bust. Which brings us to the single most important number. If you were designing one of these systems from scratch and could only know one thing, this is it: the daily maximum feed input. If you get this number wrong, just a little bit off, your entire life support system is either going to be overwhelmed and fail, or it's going to be way too big and you'll waste a ton of money. Either way, you're looking at a potential disaster. So what's so cool about this is how every single pellet of feed sets off this perfectly predictable chain reaction. It's like a cascade of dominoes that ripples through the entire life support system of our spaceship. Let's follow that chain. First up, solid waste. For every single kilogram of feed you put in the tank, you can expect about 250 grams to come out as, well, poop and uneaten food. And if you don't get that stuff out of there, and fast, it starts to rot, sucking up precious oxygen and just polluting the whole environment.
Okay, next domino, oxygen. As the fish digests that same kilogram of feed, they're breathing, right? And they use up about half a kilogram of oxygen to do it. Oxygen is, without a doubt, the most critical thing for them to survive, and that demand is tied directly, one-to-one, with how much food they're eating.
And when you use oxygen, what do you produce? Carbon dioxide. It's the same for fish. For every kilo of oxygen they burn, they pump out about 1.2 kilos of CO2. That CO2 dissolves in the water, makes it more acidic, and if you don't get it out, it really starts to stress out the fish. And last, but definitely not least, we have the most dangerous waste product of all: ammonia. See, fish get rid of their nitrogen waste right through their gills, and about 9% of the protein that was in that feed gets turned directly into something called total ammoniacal nitrogen, or TAN for short. And this stuff is seriously toxic. But wait, it gets even trickier. This tan stuff actually comes in two flavors. You've got a less harmful version and a highly toxic version. And the scary part is, as the water gets warmer or the pH goes up, more and more of the ammonia shifts into that super toxic form. So the people running the farm aren't just managing how much ammonia there is, they're fighting a constant battle against how deadly it can become from one moment to the next. Okay, so if feed is the fuel, and we know it produces all this nasty exhaust, how do you design a cleaner, high-performance fuel for a spaceship? Well, it all comes down to picking a feed with some very, very specific qualities. You're looking for 4 key things in an optimal feed. First, it has to be super digestible. You want the fish to absorb as many nutrients as possible, which means, less waste. Second, and this is huge, it needs to create stable, solid feces. You want something that's easy to filter out. Third, the pellet itself has to hold together. No crumbling into dust or leaking oil everywhere. And finally, the density has to be just right so it sinks at the correct speed for the tank.
And this is a perfect picture of what happens when that goes wrong, especially with the feces part. If it's too soft, it just breaks apart into these tiny particles that sneak right past the filters. Then those little particles become food for bad bacteria in your biofilter. These harmful bacteria multiply like crazy and start to crowd out the good bacteria, the ones you desperately need to get rid of that toxic ammonia.
This leads to what experts call a two-way losing proposition, and that name is perfect. Think about it.
You're adding more nitrogen waste into the system from all those decaying bits, and at the exact same time, you're wrecking the system's ability to get rid of it. It's a vicious cycle, and that's why having stable feces is it's not a nice to have, it's an absolute must for a healthy system.
All right, so we've got our high-grade fuel. We're all set, right? Not quite. How you put that fuel into the engine is just as critical as the fuel itself. And the golden rule here, the strategy for maximum stability, is something called flattening the curve.
Let's look at this side by side. On one hand, you have the old way, concentrated feeding. You dump in 1 or 2 big meals a day. What happens? You get these huge spikes and crashes in oxygen demand and waste. It's a roller coaster that stresses out the fish and the equipment. But on the other hand, look at 24-hour feeding. You're giving tiny meals constantly all day long. This creates a beautiful, flat, predictable line. The system is stable, the fish are less stressed, and they grow better. It's a total game changer.
And let's be super clear about something. When we say 24-hour feeding, we don't just mean a big breakfast and a big dinner 12 hours apart. No way. That just gives you 2 big spikes instead of 1. Real 24-hour feeding means giving lots of little, micro meals timed perfectly to how long it takes a fish to digest. It's about a constant, steady trickle of food.
So the big question is, how on earth do you actually do that? How can a farm feed fish tiny amounts, around the clock, 24/7? You can't have people standing there with a scoop all day and night. It's just not possible. The answer? You engage the autopilot. And that autopilot comes in the form of AI-powered automatic feeding systems.
Now, these systems can be absolutely amazing. The pros are huge. You get incredible efficiency, the delivery is super consistent and accurate, it reduces fish stress, it's fantastic. But you've got to be aware of the cons. There's a real risk of just setting it and forgetting about it. These are machines, they can break down, the feed inside can go bad if you're not careful, and yeah, they cost a good chunk of money up front.
And this is the absolute key. The mantra here is not set and forget, it's constant maintenance. You have to remember, an AI feeder is a complex piece of machinery working in a really tough, wet environment. It needs regular checkups and care to keep working right and to make sure it's not, say, grinding up the feed pellets and ruining their quality.
So let's bring it all home. To be a successful pilot of this aquatic spaceship, you really just need a simple checklist. It all boils down to 3 core principles.
Number 1, remember that feed drives everything. Your system design, your water quality, your costs, it all starts with the feed. Number 2, quality in, quality out. Don't cheap out on the feed. Investing in that high-grade fuel pays for itself over and over again in stability. And number 3, consistency is king. A stable, predictable schedule for everything, especially feeding, is the absolute secret to making this whole thing work.
And that leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. If the key to keeping this incredibly complex, man-made ecosystem in perfect balance is just managing one single input, the feed, what can that systems thinking approach teach us about other complex environments? I mean, what's the feed that drives our global supply chains, or our cities, or maybe even our climate? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.